Gather round, heroes, and join me for an in-depth look at the classes of Demeo.
Re-upped with corrections, updates, and more YouTube ads for 2024.
In this episode, we delve into the secrets of Zedokar, Sorcerer of the Sphere. Zedokar is a true seeker of knowledge and widely traveled. He is no stranger to combat, having had to defend himself numerous times during his long journeys. He employs elemental magic to corral and destroy his enemies with devastating effect. He is a long-ranged fighter with a magical focus. Zedokar draws on the potent energies generated by the friction of the spheres. He then channels them into fiery balls of flame, crackling bolts of lightning, swirling vortices, and more. He may have several replenishing cards, but after using one he gains the charge depletion state, which makes all his replenishing cards unusable until the next turn. That leaves a second action point for a different card or a move action. Novice players might use up all their cards and skip their turn waiting for the replenishing card. The Sorcerer will excel when you fully understand how the cards work, can recognize situations to use them effectively, and know the abilities of your party members. Don't use your single-shot cards when you can control the situation without them. Keep in mind where the rest of the party is and who acts after you. Stunning a big bad lets them focus on mopping up the scrubs.
I'll leave the monsters now.
Don't be afraid to use physical force. Zed's left jab is deadly. Attack where you know you can win, or at least reduce an enemy's health for an easier kill for the rest of the party. Target enemies with 5 and 8 health to prepare them for the heavy hitters, doing 3 points of damage, to quickly finish them off. On the flip side, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, so take advantage of situations where you can strike a large number of enemies. Not only is this doing a lot of damage, but you earn mana for every target you hit. Cheap cards like Vortex can generate much more mana by using them than they would by recycling the card. In this example, 140% instead of 10%.
Hey, am I in this one?
Keep close to the defenders of the party, and out of the range of monsters until you're ready to deal with them. Instead of skipping a turn, move to a better location. This could mean pushing forward, reaching safety, maneuvering for a better vantage point for your next ranged attack, laying a smackdown, or just picking up treasure. Zap is one of Zed's replenishing cards. It has a long line-of-sight range and can target enemies including Charmed, lamps, and water tiles. Dry targets take 1 damage or 3 on a crit, and are stunned for 1 turn, preventing them from taking any action. This allows Zedokar to pause most regular enemies, including elementals, scab rats, and giant slimes. If you're not sure, check the target's immunities before zapping it. Wet targets take triple damage and dry out. Then the zap bounces to nearby targets. The unpredictability of this is a major part of what gives Zed a bad reputation in the hands of an inexperienced player. The attack will chain to other viable targets up to 4 spaces away.
Or more.
It can fork, and it can continue to arc to new targets up to 4 times.
Or more.
It usually doubles back, potentially hitting a target more than once. It can keep going in the same direction, with a theoretical maximum distance of 16 spaces from the original target. That's unlikely, but there have been reports of heroes struck 11 spaces away. Water puddles can be targeted too, and with some luck you can bank shots around corners. You don't need to worry about Zed. He's never hit by his own lightning.
He's almost never hit by his own lightning. A wet Zed can electrocute himself, though we've only seen this once.
But you'll want to make sure that your friends are more than 4 spaces away from the target. More distance is obviously better, but within 4 spaces, you're basically making them lose a turn. Combos. Wetting your target before zapping it will up your damage and add water puddles to the area that will encourage arcing. Water Flask is a free action and wets a 3x3 area up to medium range. Water Lamp and Scroll of Tsunami can make targets wet too, but they're not as convenient to use. The wet multiplier applies to magic bonuses, so with a +3 magic bonus, your minimum damage is 12. And that's to every target hit in Chain Lightning, going up to as high as 27 on the primary target. Once a wet target has taken extra damage from electricity or freezing, it immediately dries out. Zap is an easy way to dry out a wet target, even if they're immune to stunned, before using a fireball on it to avoid losing half the damage. Overcharge is the second replenishing card, though it cannot be used in the same turn as Zap and vice versa. They might as well be a single card along with Lightning Bolt. It can be used only on Zed himself. The first time requires no roll, and gives Zed the Overcharge status for 3 turns. This can be applied even before entering the dungeon. While overcharged, his Zap card is enhanced, and melee attacks on him do 1 point of counter damage to the attacker, stunning it for 1 turn. This is generic damage, so wet attackers don't take additional damage, and magic bonuses don't apply. While overcharged, the Sorcerer is vulnerable to the wet status.
And he hates it when you throw water on him.
If he moves onto a water tile or otherwise becomes wet, he discharges, taking a point of damage and stunning himself for 1 turn.
You don't need to wait around to dry out. You can step in corruption or take fire damage, but if that's not going to work for you, try casting Magic Shield on yourself. It removes the wet status, and invulnerability keeps you dry for the entire duration.
Negative statuses, like Stunned, Frozen, and Tangled, are counted down at the end of the turn, so you won't lose a turn by stunning yourself. You will still take damage and lose any remaining action points. He can intentionally discharge by using the Overcharge a second time. Targets in adjacent spaces are stunned and take 3 magical damage or 6 on a crit. A miss has no effect.
No. Overcharge is excellent because a miss still stuns enemies. It just doesn't do damage.
Water gives the usual triple damage bonus and encourages chaining to other wet targets. Even water puddles do this. Lightning Bolt replaces Zap when Zed is overcharged. It operates the same but does 3 magical damage, or 6 on a crit, and chains to other targets regardless of whether they are wet or not. Secondary targets still just take the 1 point of magical damage.
You don't always want to overcharge. In fact, I'd save it for special occasions. Zap is less risky to use, available every turn, and ideal when your target is near an ally.
Fireball is a starting card. It has long line-of-sight range and targets enemies, including charmed, lamps, and empty spaces. It has good mana burn value. The area of effect is 3x3, with the primary target taking 10 magical fire damage, and surrounding spaces taking 5. A critical hit really packs a wallop, doing double damage to the center and quadruple damage to the edges, 20 points to the entire area. Wet targets take half damage, and corrupted targets are immune to fire damage, actually healing 3 points. Corruption tiles will multiply when hit by a fireball. Fire combusts poison clouds, expanding the range of the fire damage throughout. All within the poison cloud take 5 damage. Combos. The assassin can prime a target by first tossing a poison bomb, which has the same area of effect as the fireball. The overlapping area takes double damage. The luck potion guarantees a crit. Not only does that mean quad damage at the edges of the fireball, but poison clouds ignite for 20 damage to all within. And that brings us to this episode's challenge. Spread a bunch of poison with gas lamps, spore fungus, poison bombs, and even portals of Nos, so they merge into one giant cloud. And once you've got a few big bads inside, hit them with a fireball to do 40 damage to the targets and 20 damage throughout the cloud. Freeze is the second starting card. It has the same range, targets, and area of effect as a fireball. Resale and mana burn value are very good. The effect is quite different, causing 3 magical cold damage on all targets, or 9 on a crit, and freezing them for 1 turn. Wet targets take an additional 2 damage.
And has anybody noticed that crashing noise like 5 seconds after he casts Freeze?
A frozen target loses its turn and becomes vulnerable to most attacks, taking 2 extra damage. Attacks which do not gain this bonus include Astral Strike, Feral Charge, and Hurricane Anthem. Fire damage gets the bonus, and then thaws them out, removing the frozen status. Combos. Once again, the Water Flask can wet a 3x3 area in advance of a freeze spell, granting bonus damage to all targets. It's actually the same +2 damage as the triple damage bonus from Zap, and it doesn't run the risk of bouncing back onto your own party. Banish has long line of sight range and targets anything except emplacements, empty spaces, coin piles, rat nests, debris, and points of interest. Elven Mystics are protected from this spell.
Any enemy with a teleport attack is protected from this spell.
It has no effect on bosses and eggs.
And rat's nests.
It sends the target to a random but far-reaching point on the board, doing a single point of damage from the drop.
It's too late! We're banished, genius!
It can save monsters for later, detonate lamps, or roughly transport friendlies, including the Sorcerer. This method of travel isn't generally advised, but it can prove beneficial at times. Combos. Following up with a regroup card can provide a shortcut for the whole party straight to the end of the dungeon.
Then come on over. Yeah, I can make a portal to the middle one, so we can...
Banishing an invisible or stealthed party member makes for safer exploration. Lamps cause random chaos and kill monsters in unexplored areas. Be cautious though, because if it doesn't kill them, it wakes them up, and they come looking for you. Magic Barrier requires no roll and targets an empty space in long line of sight range. It has very good resale and mana burn value. A magic wall is summoned in the target space for 3 turns, plus 1 space to the left and right from the sorcerer's point of view if they are also empty. After 1 turn, its duration can be checked by picking up a segment. It has a self-destruct timer, just like an elemental does. It cannot be seen through, passed through, damaged, or targeted by enemies. The wall is solid, and attacks cannot be made through the diagonal spaces. Kana seems to be the exception here. Creatures can be imprisoned for a short time by containing them to a corner. 2 Magic Barrier cards can actually trap a creature in the open if built diagonally. Just remember to build the far wall first, or the near wall will block your line of sight. The barrier can block doorways or corridors up to 3 spaces wide. Like any wall, it can keep things out, and it can keep things in. Combos. An enemy trapped on all 4 sides by normal dungeon walls or magic walls will be hit by all 18 swords that fall from a Heaven's Fury. Even if it isn't contained in a single space, the smaller the space it's confined to, the more swords will strike it. Magic Shield is a defensive spell that requires no roll and targets anything except empty spaces, coin piles, and points of interest in long line of sight range. The target gains protected status for 3 turns, causing all damage to be halved, rounded down. This gives de facto immunity to poison, slime, rats, and other minor damage. You can cast this when you receive the poison status to avoid taking any damage from it.
And remember that casting it removes the wet status, too.
It also reduces the amount of health an elven priest can leech. Used while overcharged, it allows Zedokar to counter swarms of attackers without taking much damage himself. Combos. Having trouble with your lure going down every time a berserk cave troll or boss appears? Try a magic shield to give it enough resilience to last. Vortex is another card with long line-of-sight range which can target enemies including charmed, lamps, and empty spaces. It causes a vortex effect in a 9x9 area, pulling everything to the center point and causing 1 point of magical damage, or 2 on a crit. This can be used to pull enemies around. You can drag nearby ones further away, and drag concealed ones into view. The minimal damage is suitable for breaking lamps, and with everything in the area pulled tightly, it can have lethal results. Keep this card in mind for dealing with rifts, and also exposing High Priest Umbal when you lose track of him amongst the clones. Combos. After packing all the enemies together, it can be very efficient to follow up with a smaller area of effect attack. The Sorcerer's own Fireball and Freeze work well, as does Hail of Arrows, Whirlwind Attack, Pitfighter Sleep, and other AoEs. Zedokar works well towards the beginning of the roster, before the melee fighters dive into the fray to clean up the leftovers. He needs separation to use his Wild Lightning attacks, so he relies on the defenders at the end of the roster to move in afterwards and protect him, or maybe pull him out of danger. That's all for today. If you learned something, zap that like button, and may what you've learned here protect you as you travel beyond the Veil. This has been MyWhy.
And this has been Jolin14.
See you in Helmar.